Okay, this is a quick video showing how to use Make the Cut to create designs for book folding. Okay, I'm going to sort of talk you through this. I've got, for those that aren't that familiar with Make the Cut, I've got my mat set to typical mat, which is 8.27 by 11.69 inches, okay, and you can create a custom size there. Alright, I have mine this way because this is how my printer prints out, and I find that it's easier. If your printer prints out in landscape, you can actually figure out which way you do it through your print setup menu. In order to get the paper showing on the mat, you want to go to print options, put a tick in show paper on the mat, don't put a tick in any of the others, and then put a tick in print wireframe only. You need this to print the lines that you're going to make, okay? So I'm not going to bother cutting it, so I'm not bothered about the rest of these settings. The colour is black because that's what I want the printer to use. So I'm going to import an SVG, okay? This is my computer, so if I go, that's my desktop, I go down to where I've got my cutting files. I know which one I want to do, so I have to find that one. Okay, and then I want to go above here. I'm actually looking for a sewing machine, it should do really well. Down below here. There it is, that one there. Okay. So let's put that onto my mat. Now I want this to run across the face of a book. So what I need to do is I need to rotate it by 90 degrees, which is this button here. Okay. I'm going to set it so that it's towards the bottom of the page. You're going to have to figure out on your books where yours are going to be. So I'm going to stretch mine down towards the bottom. I want it quite distorted is the word that I would use for this. Okay. So, I've now got a sewing machine on my mat. What I want to do next is I want to click on the default layer, and this little infinity sort of sign thing up here, I'm going to click on that. That really releases the other menu. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to draw a freehand line by clicking on the pencil. If I press Ctrl and I go across, hopefully you can see the blue lines that appear at the end of the lines, or at the end of the line. That signifies when the line is straight, okay? If you haven't got it running along the 0 degree, you're not going to get that little blue line, which is just there. So I'm going to extend mine about there, I think. There we go. Okay, I'm going to take this line. You can tell this line is straight if you look at this box here. This says 0.0000. That is a completely flat line, okay? So that is what I want. I want a completely flat line. If I drew with a Bezier curve, you can draw a flat line, okay? You're going to have to sort of be a bit careful about it. There we go. Oh, I always forget to unclick that one. If I click on select this one here, I'm going to actually unlock the aspect ratio, and I'm going to type in the settings that I had in the other one and hit enter. Now that doesn't make it completely flat. If you can see this bit here, it says 0.0010, which is only a 1,000th of an inch, but it's still not a flat line, and it's enough to distort any pattern that you use as well. Okay, so I don't want this line. Okay, so I'm going to delete. Whoops, no, delete the line. That's it. So I'm going back to the one that I drew with a pencil. I'm going to keep clicking till I get back to my little arrows, and I'm going to put it just under an inch from the edge of the page, okay? If you're working on a smaller book, your image will be flatter, squashed more. If you're working on a full-size hardback, the bigger the pages, the more you've got to play with, really. I do my line to about here so that I can actually fold down this line. If you can see that little arrow, I will fold all the way down this line to here, over the edge of the book, and that gives me a starting point. So let's talk about books. In order to paper fold on a book, you need to know how many separate sheets of paper are within the book, because that's going to determine how many folds you put in. Some people just fold roughly in the middle of a book. Some people like to use the whole book. I like to use the whole book. Okay, it means more folding, but it does give me, I think, a better finish. So, if we talk about a hardback book, and say it's got, when you look at the page numbers, okay, say it goes up to 268, alright? So, 268 is actually not the correct number for the number of physical sheets of paper in the book. 268 pages is actually 134 sheets of paper. You do need to divide by 2. You're looking for sheets of paper, not pages, okay? In a hardback book, you have the chipboard, then you have a piece of generally white or cream paper stuck onto the inside cover, and that piece of paper then comes round and forms the very first sheet of paper in the book. That is not included in the number of pages, okay? I find that if I count the very first sheet of paper, which is not included in the number of pages, any sheets of paper not included in the number of pages, okay, need to be added to the total that you already have. So I had 134. So if I add the front sheet that feels different to the rest of the pages, if I add that one in, that makes it 135. And at a hardback book, you generally get a few pages or sheets of paper as a lead off for the print run. So if you've got 3, you want to add those 3 sheets of paper to your 135, so that gives 138. And then you've got the sheet at the back of the book, which forms the inside of the back cover, okay, the one that feels different. So you need to add that in as well. Well, that's how I do it. So that would give me 139 sheets of paper to fold, okay? 139 sheets of paper would do this quite nicely, alright? So what I want to do is this line here, I now need to make sure that I have 139 of these, okay? So click on that, right click, down to duplicate, click on duplicate, not the nested or the rotated, okay? So click on duplicate. You see I've already figured this one out before. So in this rows column, I have 139 rows across my sheet of paper. If my image was twisted 90 degrees, I would be looking at columns to go down the piece of paper, okay? So I've got one column, as in this lot, okay? And I have got 139 individual lines in this, so I've got 139, okay? Spacing. I tend to find that this is easier because I don't know why, I use it visually to bring the box with all these in to roughly the right area, so I've got less fiddling to do. And you can see it, you know, if I click on 9, it goes up, okay? If I click on 10, it can take it up to 0.1 of an inch. You know, that's how it works. I want to just get enough to cover it. So I'm going to click apply there. That has given me 139 lines. So I'm going to click apply, and then I'm going to make sure that that's selected. I'm going to zoom into the top part. Now what I want is this first line here to be just slightly under the leading edge of the shape, okay? So I'm now, if you look over this side, I have got no snapping on. When you're working this fine, you don't want snapping on, okay? You want to keep it off, and that means that you can be quite accurate as to where your first page is going to intersect this shape. So I've now moved mine up by using the arrows on my keyboard, just the up arrow, and that brings it just underneath this leading edge of the green shape, okay? It just runs just underneath there. That's fine. So now I'm going to go down to the bottom. Now the issue with the bottom is that I'm going to have to find the middle point, which is this arrow here, okay? And I want it to be just inside this line here. So the last line that I have on the page wants to be just in there like that, okay? So if I bring it across, you can just see there that the green shape has got the red line going across it. Okay, so I'm going to zoom out so that you can see what I've done. Come on, there we go. Right, so there's my page. These are my lines, these are my fold lines, okay? And there's my shape. Now, what I want to do is I want to select all so that it's all one shape, okay? And I'm just going to weld it, okay? Because that means that if I make a mistake and click on something, okay, it is now all in one piece and I haven't completely destroyed everything, okay? So there is my shape. I only do to here because that creates a line along which to fold the piece of paper so that you can put it over the edge of the page as a guide to keep it straight. Okay, a lot of this is working on straight. If I go to print preview now, okay, you can hopefully see this is what is going to be printed out. Alright, so the very first fold, which would be on the first sheet of paper in the book, you would fold that way and then that way, okay? Because what you're aiming at is leaving unfolded paper in this gap here, okay? That's what you want. This would be a really easy shape to actually book fold because it's not that detailed. These would come in quite nicely, all these little details. So this would be a really good book fold. The more complicated the design, the more pages that you need. Not pages, sheets. Okay? For each letter, you're talking about 50 sheets of paper for each letter of the alphabet. If it's one of the larger letters like an M, you'd be talking probably about 100 sheets of paper in order to get a really good definition across the book. Okay? The simpler the design, the less pages you need. Like I say, 139 on this would give me a really nice sewing machine. Okay? But when you're using letters, you need 50 sheets of paper per letter. The bigger the letters, like the M, the W, you know, the really wide letters, you're going to need about 100, 75 to 100 to get good definition on those. Okay? So all you need to do then is just print this on your printer. Okay? That's your pattern done. And this, honestly, it works. It's easy. There's not a huge amount that you have to do apart from knowing how many sheets of paper are in each book. Okay? I would assume that you could do this in Cameo or other cutting software. I don't have that. Well, I do, but I have an old version, and I haven't got my Cameo here. That's at my father's. But that's what you would want to do. You know, you want a straight, flat line, which is the important part. They have to be flat because you're going to use those as your guides. If the line is distorted in any way, then it's going to distort all the way down your page. So you do have to think about that. Hopefully this, I find this is really quick and really easy, and I hope that you do too. For me, this is the quickest and easiest way of doing it and the less brain damage. So hopefully you find it useful. Thanks very much for watching, and bye.